do as a Christian? What is it you do as a Christian? Do you know what to say? I'm getting asked more and more these days because I do a lot of interfaith dialogue, and even at General Seminary there was a Muslim man who took classes with us, and we prayed together, this man and I. He said prayers pretty much the same way we say prayers. And one of the striking features of Luke's gospel is his portrayal of Christians, and especially Christ himself, as walking, journeying, always on the way. He's either on his way to Jerusalem, on his way to the cross, on his way to up a mountain to pray. And many of Jesus' characters, or his disciples, they are characters, they also are following him, trying to follow in his way, but they don't often get it. So this little parable today is part of the chapter setup that is taking Jesus from Galilee into Jerusalem. It started in chapter 9, and it goes all the way to chapter 19. And this little story is the beginning of the third part of the journey. So we're reminded at the beginning that they are headed to Jerusalem. What do we do as Christians? Wherever he goes, we go. We follow him. Christianity was known as the way before it was known as Christianity. So we're going to be good Luke followers, and we're going to follow him. And what he does is he's wandering around in the borderlands, in the wilderness. He is between Galilee and Samaria on his way to Jerusalem. And in those borderlands, he meets a group of people who are even more marginalized. So we're in that in-between space, between destinations. We are meeting a group of people with leprosy who are way on the margins of their culture. And this story develops the way you should follow Jesus and what happens if you don't. Sort of. All right, let's follow what happens. If you had leprosy in these ancient days, you were ostracized from Jewish rule, ostracized from the Jewish community. You had to go every 7 days and have the priest look at you, examine your skin, and see if you were healing enough to go another 7 days, and he'd check you again. And if the wounds had healed up and were not that white, ashy color, he would pronounce you clean, and you would be ritually clean to come back into the community. If you had these sores on your skin, you were to go on the outside of the community, live in single units, come together only to beg, and even then you had to cover your mouth and stay a big distance away from people you were begging from. So when these 10 lepers come, we can imagine them all with their hands over their face. They're ringing bells, they have to announce their presence, and they're begging Jesus for mercy. Jesus, who does do works of wonder in the wilderness and in the borderlands, doesn't let us down. He tells them, however, like I was telling Victoria this morning, not you are healed or you are forgiven, get up and walk, carry your mat, something dramatic. He says, turn around, go to the priest and show yourselves to them. And they all obey. They all turn around and leave. And on their way, they are healed. So we are to understand that the big moment in this story is not Jesus actually healing them, but their response. What do followers of Jesus do? Well, 9 of them kept walking. They were following what he said to do. He said, go show yourselves to the priest, and they did. But what that one person did is what we are supposed to do with our prayer lives. And if we look at this as a daily ritual of what we're supposed to do every day to follow Jesus, we can follow the stages that this man follows. So he's walking with the group. They're walking away from Jesus. We don't know if they all looked down, but we know he did. The first thing he does is notice. So when you wake up in the morning, notice where you are. Notice what joints still work. Notice what the weather is. Notice who you are. Present yourself to God. Here I am, such as I am. Where's my coffee? Notice who you are. That's what happens first. Before we can do any thanksgiving or prayer or following, we have to notice that God gave us something today that we are supposed to honor. So the man looks down and a miracle has occurred. He's healed. Why the others don't realize this, we'll get to in a minute. But he looks down, is healed, and his first reaction is conversion. Every time you see the word turned in our scripture, it means conversion. He converts, he turns, and he goes back to thank the initiator of this miracle. Who made this happen? God made this happen. Through whom? Through Jesus. And he lickety-split turns and comes running back to Jesus, and with a loud voice, what does he do? He praises God. He knows where miracles come from, that Jesus is a conduit through which the grace and mercy of God flows. So he gives praise to God. You could picture the sign of praise in those days was to stand firmly on your 2 feet, hold your arms up like this, and sing your praises as you look into heaven. And that's what he's doing with a really loud voice. Then he flops himself down on the floor, all the way down, prostrate, and he thanks Jesus. He thanks God, he thanks Jesus, and he honors the holiness of this moment. So praise and thanksgiving go together, but they've got lots of body movement. Some people make fun of us Episcopalians with our kneeling and standing and sitting and kneeling and standing and sitting. And some of us don't actually know why we do all that. We like it, but we don't know why. This is why. Because in the ancient days, they were constantly throwing themselves down. And the reason we do that is when you're prostrate, you get smaller and smaller and smaller. You shrink in recognition of the grandeur of God. That God, like is represented in our chapel with that beautiful mosaic, is glittering and shining up above us in celestial light. And we don't often think of the beauty of God residing in this splendor. But when a miracle happens, we have this little electrical shock that connects us to the wonders of God. And we make ourselves little to show God that we are nothing and you are everything. That you can change my life in an instant, just like that. So this is why we get little. We get big. Then we get little again. It's to get our bodies involved with our prayer. Now, the kicker of this story is not just when Jesus says, "Where are the other 9?" That is a good question. But the kicker is when he says, "Rise and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." Wasn't he well already? Oh, this is the clue to our spiritual journey, is that we have bodies that can be healthy or sick, young or old, crippled or running races. But it's our spiritual condition that God is interested in, as well as our health. So when Jesus says, "Your health has made you well," there's a transformation involved. He's recognizing this conversion of the man coming back to him and recognizing the source of what actually healed him. It's in that recognition, our thanks and our praise, that we are made well. And that's what we do as Christians. We count on spiritual health in order to follow Christ. That we have to change something. And our bodies are a good prod to get our minds in the right location. So let's look for a minute at these other 9, because the rest of us are those who follow Jesus, and we're in the majority. We are those 9. We have to own it, because that's why Jesus is telling the story. Not everybody remembers to come back and say thank you. We just forget. So what are the reasons? I've thought of a few of them this morning. One of them, his head's in the clouds. He doesn't even look down. He's kind of disconnected. His head is doing one thing, but his body is all on auto control. He doesn't even notice he's been healed, and off he walks. He's in his own world. 2 of them, they look, they see they're healed, and they jump into the future. They think, finally, I'm healed. I can go back to my family. I can go back to my job. They're jumping ahead to what they're going to do now that they are healed. Thanks just didn't enter into their heads. 3 of them are angry that they weren't the center of attention. They wanted Jesus to call them up and for them to have a miraculous healing in front of the crowds and for them to be in the spotlight. And he didn't do that. He just sent them to the priest, and no fuss was made. So they're a little bit angry, and they're not thankful when they're angry. And 3 of them think that this is all a ruse. They don't believe it. They see that they're healed, but they know by the time they get through with their journey and standing in front of the priest, it'll all be gone. And if it's not gone then, the healing will be disappeared by tomorrow. We'll be sick again. They're not used to good things happening to them, so they assume the worst. Now, I've done all these things. I go out to dinner and forget to say thank you. It's not my home table, so I forget. I get projecting into the future, and I don't think about how I'm grateful because I'm worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm angry that somebody slighted me. Thanksgiving comes at the bottom of the list sometimes because I come first. It's just how we're wired. So Jesus wants us to have a look at this one Samaritan. This one Samaritan who is doubly ostracized. He not only is out in the wilderness and shunned by the community because of leprosy, but he is a Samaritan, which if you were a Samaritan in Jerusalem area during Jesus' day, you were shunned completely. You were looked down on and you were overlooked. Because he is doubly ostracized, he is doubly grateful. And that's where this joy comes, is from being not only healed, but made well and included in this love that God has for all of us. We know by the continuation of Luke's story in the book of Acts that Samaritans were an integral part of this new community of believers. They followed Jesus, and they did these body prayers of praising God standing up and being really little when they were trying to express the omnipotence of God and our limited nature as humans. And that's what we do. It's a very active faith. We're constantly getting down, getting up. Beat your breast if you want to. It's good to remember that you are a sinner and that you're human, and it's okay to make mistakes because God is always forgiving us. And then we go to bed and we do it all again the next day. It's a lot of work, but it keeps us healthy, and we will be made well. Amen.